And I think, and we are going to introduce Sherilyn Crowther. Sherilyn can't join us tonight because she is out of state, but everybody knows that Sherilyn has been on this board for, I think this is her 5th year. She is immediate past president and currently is is chairing the Family and Community Engagement Committee. And I'm going to do a slight, very brief intro. So Sherilyn is in North Seattle, and she has a student, one graduate and one adult student receiving special education services. I will not be disclosing more, but I think the introduction is almost unnecessary because everyone who comes to our meetings and knows our work knows Sherilyn. So I will go ahead and call on Ashley Thirkle and then Susan Hernandez. If we could please have you do like a brief introduction, that would be fantastic.
Hi, yeah. Thank you, Yana. I'm Ashley Thurkel. I have 2 kids in the SPS system. I have a pre-Ker that's going into kindergarten next year, and I have a 5th grader that's going to be rising to 6th. Both have just a gamut of disabilities ranging from, well, since this is recorded, I won't say them all, but like very, very many. It's a lot of experience across the board with different kinds of disabilities between the 2 of them, and also giftedness as well. So the twice exceptional dilemma and challenges that come up, I'm very familiar with. We used to speak Spanish in our home. Off the top of my head, I can already think of some very good Spanish-speaking potential nominees for next year if they're willing. Yeah, is there anything else you'd like me to say, Yana?
No, this is good. I mean, people can also are welcome to ask if they want to know anything. I know you. I know you've been involved and you've been doing a great job advocating for your kids, in the system we have. So thank you for stepping up. Thank you for letting me beg you and agreeing to be the help us get the next executive committee elected. Okay. Susan Hernandez, I am looking for you so that I could
Hi,
spotlight you for a
can you
minute.
hear me?
I can. Oh, I guess you're not turning on the camera today? It's
Is it
okay if you're
working?
not. Oh, here you go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Susan Hernandez. I am in Wallingford, and I have 2 kids in SPS, one that receives special ed services and one that doesn't. And I have been a member of the uh, special education PTA for several years now, when my son joined kindergarten, and they've been super helpful in just understanding what questions to ask and what the rights are of kids with disabilities, and so this is my way of paying it forward. And what else did you ask?
Oh, just if you want to say which part of town or, kind of like anything about your kids or your experience in SBS, but you don't have to. It's just a very brief intro. Like, I know that
Okay.
we've also seen you on the Inclusionary Practices Committee.
Yeah,
So,
and so I've been in, sorry, it's bedtime routine here, and so there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. So yeah, I've been involved in several different capacities. I was in the Inclusion Practice Committee for a bit, and then y also at the school locally, we tried to do really promote inclusionary practices at the school level, and so I'm really happy to be here. And I think I mentioned we're in the Wallingford area.
yeah, thank you so much. So, I guess we're gonna try to elect our committee, nominating committee as a slate. So if you are a member, I do hope we have enough people, we have a quorum, because I know how the evening routine goes, on Tuesday evening especially. So, you can only vote if you're a member. of this PTA. So I would ask that you can use either the raise hand feature once we vote, or you can also raise your hand. That either one counts. And then keep it up for a little bit because we're going to have to do the counting. And can I have a motion?
I move to elect the 3 candidates to our nominating committee. This is Kate.
All right, is there a second?
This is Christy. I second.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Kate. All right. Is there any discussion? Are there any questions? Seeing none. All in favor of electing Susan Hernandez, Ashley Turkell, and Sherilyn Crowther to be our nominating committee, please raise your hand, virtual or actual. And actually, if you're a member, even Susan, and you can vote for yourself. So please, that helps us get you guys elected and move on, and so we can get started on the work. All right. 1, 2. I'm trying to. All right. So, well, congratulations, the to the elected nominating committee. The motion passes, and we can move on to our next and very much appreciated item on the agenda. I already see Kathy is here. Kathy George, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody can put their hands down. we can talk about this. And Kate, are you able to share the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so go right ahead. And I'm going to.
Oops.
Ooh,
That was a mistake.
that's okay. Things happen, right? So, Kathy, I'm going to spotlight you.
Okay.
Gosh.
Yeah,
Are you seeing the slides now?
I am. So
Okay,
just
great.
go straight to Kathy's slide, I think. And then, nope. All righty. So I'm going to do a brief intro. Well, all right. Thank you, Kathy, for being here. So Kathy George is a partner at Johnston George LLP. Kathy has been in private practice for more than 10 years, focusing on administrative and appellate law. In the civil rights area, Kathy has extensive experience helping parents improve special education services for their children with disabilities. She also has substantial experience helping news organizations and citizens exercise their rights to know what government agencies are doing, including handling numerous cases under state and federal sunshine laws. Her practice also has emphasized protecting the environment from harmful developments. Kathy began her law career in 2005 as a law clerk to the Honorary Jerry Alexander, then Chief Justice of the Washington Supreme Court. Before practicing law, Kathy worked as a political reporter and assistant city editor at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer for 15 years. She frequently speaks at public workshops and legal conferences concerning the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, the Public Records Act, and the Open Public Meeting Act. Kathy, is a fierce advocate protecting vulnerable children from excessive physical restraint and isolation in public schools. She brought, and thank you very much, Kathy, for keeping at that. She brought a case challenging the constitutionality and legality of state rulemaking in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and has represented a coalition of children's advocates in the landmark education funding case, McCleary versus State of Washington, advocating for full funding of special education for children with disabilities. She has worked extensively to protect public access to government records as a board member and legal committee chair of the Washington Coalition for Open Government, and as Governor Jay Inslee's appointee on the Sunshine Committee, also called the Washington State Public Records Exemption Accountability Committee. Kathy is dedicated to serving the community both as an attorney and as a volunteer. So to sum it up, before I hand it over, Kathy George helps families make informed decisions and assert their rights on top of a lot of other things. So welcome, Kathy. Thank you for being here. We're all excited to have you. We're going to try to kind of have you give us some overview and then take some questions, and we're going to try to call on people. We'll see how things go. So feel free to, ask or kind of steer us different way if that's what it works for you. And we're going to try to monitor the chat as well. So welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that that nice introduction. I guess I need to update the website because some of that is a little outdated. I'm no longer on the Sunshine Committee, and Jay Inslee's no longer governor, and a few other things to update there. But thank you. That was a very nice introduction. So yeah, I have been doing special education law actually for about 17 years. And as you mentioned, I was a journalist before practicing law, and I did actually cover the Seattle school beat for 1 year. And while I was on the state capitol beat, I wrote a 5-part series about inequities in the state education funding system. So you could say that I've been an education watchdog for a very long time. So I'm here tonight. I was asked to answer 3 questions about what's going on with the chaos in the federal education system. And I don't have definitive answers because it's, as you know, a bit of a fluid situation. But I'm just going to go through each question briefly. And the first question is, what exactly is going on? And so, in a nutshell, President Trump is dismantling the U.S. Education Department. And this has, he says he's doing this in order to reduce red tape and to shift control of the education system to the states and to parents. And what this has looked like so far is eliminating about half of the staff of the U.S. Department of Education nationally, closing 7.
Oh! Jesus versus Donald Trump!
A possible elimination in progress.
Apologies. This is why we try to have people log in. I removed the person because I've seen this video. It doesn't get any better. So thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. And we've also seen some shifting of priorities as far as what activities are undertaken by this diminished staff. And the way this has unfolded is, first we had on March 3rd a statement by the new education secretary about the final mission of the education department, that she intended to carry out this final mission, which is to eliminate bureaucracy and shift control of the education system to the states. And then about a week later, March 11th, we had the announcement of the reduction in force. And so we went from a little over 4,000 employees when Biden was president to a little over 2,000 employees. 600 of those reductions were buyouts, and the remaining reductions were through placing people on leave involuntarily. And I'm going to talk a lot about the Office of Civil Rights, but about half of the staff of the Office of Civil Rights has been eliminated. And that, as I'll talk about a little bit more later, that's probably the biggest impact for our community that you may be concerned about. So the second question that I was asked to address was, and after the March 11th reduction in force announcement, the other big development was last Thursday, President Trump signing an executive order saying that he is dismantling the education department, except for what he called 4 necessities. And he did say that federal funding for special education will be fully preserved, along with Title I funding for low-income students and Pell Grants for low-income college students. So he says he's not going to eliminate special education. But what he does want to do is redistribute those core programs to other agencies. And so the second question I was asked to address is, how will these White House actions affect our kids? And the answer is it's not entirely clear yet for a couple of reasons. First of all, the Department of Education was created by Congress, and it cannot be completely eliminated without an act of Congress. So there are proposals to eliminate the Education Department and shift its, at least these core programs, to other agencies. There have been similar proposals in the past that didn't go anywhere. So there is some question whether Congress will just say no to this, as it has in the past. So we don't really know for sure that the department will be eliminated entirely. If it is eliminated entirely by Congress, one idea is to transfer special education funding and oversight to the Department of Health and Human Services, which, as you probably know, is led now by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but I don't want you to worry about that, because he does say that only part of his brain was eaten by a worm, so he's fine. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. The other reason for uncertainty is that we have a lawsuit pending. It was filed by 20 states on March 13th to stop the dismantling of the Education Department. Just yesterday, the 20 states filed a motion for preliminary injunction, along with many dozens. There were over 50, I think, declarations in support of that motion. As of today, when I checked, there was no response from the federal government yet, and of course there's no ruling yet. So that is another ball in the air. If that suit is successful, then some of these harms that we're worried about may not actually come to pass as we hope.
This is
But there
Kathy.
are,
Kathy,
yeah,
can I quickly ask you? So what is supposed to happen, like assume we really aren't not knowledgeable. We're knowledgeable, but not about what you're talking about, obviously.
yeah.
So what is the expected next step? Like you said, they haven't responded. Are they supposed to respond, and how long? What could the response be? What do we need to wait for next? That type of thing. So we understand it. And then there was also a question. Do you mean there are proposals in Congress? That's from Brenda.
Yes, there are proposals in Congress. There are a number of them, and I have to tell you, I have not read the details of them. I've just read about them. But the general thrust, these are Republican proposals to eliminate the education department and transfer certain core functions to other agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services. So that's the general gist of the proposals. And that is what the Trump administration is asking for, but nothing has moved yet. So that's, so we don't know what's going to pass Congress. We do know that in the past there was bipartisan opposition to eliminating the education department. So it's possible that none of these proposals will pass, and that the department will survive, in at least in its hobbled form. Does that answer your question about Congress?
So this is Jana. Brenda, if it doesn't answer your question, feel free to unmute and ask a follow-up question. Somebody, and in the meantime, I will say somebody's asking, is it 20 states now that filed? Is it? It is? Okay, there's a nod.
Yes, 20 states were part of the original filing. New York is the lead plaintiff. Washington is one of the 20 states. And I'll talk later about sort of how I kind of got involved in the case. So Washington is not leading the litigation, but it is contributing declarations, and its lawyers are, among the dozens of attorneys of record in the case. So, but it is 20 states. They're, blue states. And the purpose of the lawsuit is to try to stop the reduction in force, the 50% reduction of employees. And the general argument, well, there are several arguments, but the general point of the lawsuit is that, first of all, Trump he cannot eliminate a congressionally mandated program. And this was a department created by Congress, so he can't just unilaterally get rid of it. That's one major theme.
Is this something that somebody should be informing him of, or how does how does that not how does that not ring a bell to him? It seems like somebody would be speaking up for it, and I see that, like, this is, as an immigrant, the United States is known to be very, very litigious country, right? So a lot of it is being sorted out by lawsuits, which to me seems a little bit slower than we would like. So is there any other way, or can you kind of tell us how the prognosis on how long things could take, how long he could be blocked, or how, what do we need to kind of worry about?
Well, there are a lot of lawsuits challenging a lot of President Trump's actions in his first month in office. There's a website that lists all of them, and it's a very long list. And um, you asked, shouldn't President Trump know the limits of his power? Well, you know, he doesn't agree with uh, he doesn't agree with those who are challenging his actions regarding the limits of his power, and we are going to reach at some point sort of a showdown on that issue. In other words, will the courts stop um, uh, this president from unilaterally um, seizing control of congressional programs? You know, so um, it's a question. Can he do this? Well, a lot of us believe no, he can't. It's not lawful. It exceeds his authority under the Constitution, but these are scary times. So,
Well, this is Yana. So I actually have citizenship. Uh, you know, for a few years I've had it, and I pulled up my booklet when I took the class of how to be a citizen, and I feel like what we're seeing goes directly against what I learned. Right. So that's why I asked that question. It's me as an immigrant, I'm just like, where are the checks and balances? As I know everybody's asking, right? So we're just kind of like all stunned. How can he just do that? You know.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a lot of us are asking that. Um, well, but so you know, I started by saying, in answer to the question, what, you know, how is this affecting our kids? I started by saying, well, you know, the full extent isn't known yet because it still has to be sorted out what Congress will do and what the courts will do. But there are already some harms from the cuts that took place this month. And so I these declarations in the lawsuit were just filed yesterday afternoon, and I haven't read all of them, but I did try to read through the declarations that were most pertinent to special education and students with disabilities. And so I kind of have a few uh, pertinent facts that I pulled out from those declarations. So, for example, the Office of Special Education Programs, which is part of the Department of Education, conducted national technical assistance calls where all of the states could ask questions and get guidance about special education, about how to comply with the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. And the states were recently told those calls are canceled. So they're not happening anymore. That's the end of federal special education guidance. That's according to one of the declarations I read. And it said that these monthly technical assistance calls provided critical resources for state staff on topics such as early childhood inclusion, support for military families, kindergarten transition. So that's guidance that isn't happening anymore. Okay, another declaration was by Ann Duncan, who is former Secretary of Education. And she said the loss of expertise, it that's already happened, it can't be duplicated. And that the loss of personnel that's already happened is making it impossible to enforce the laws that the Department of Education is charged with enforcing. And I'm just going to read a little bit of her statement here. So she starts off by talking about the cuts to the Office of Civil Rights. And I just want to pause and make sure that everyone here understands what OCR does. So, in our state, in Washington State, we have both federal and state laws protecting special education rights. So, in other words, Congress created the IDEA, which gives every eligible student, the right to free and appropriate public education and individualized education plan and so forth, right? It started with Congress, but Washington has adopted IDEA in its own statutes and its own regulations. And as you know, we have a state agency, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, which enforces IDEA. You can file a citizen complaint or a community complaint with OSPI and get a decision as to whether your school district has, complied with the law, right? So we have a state enforcement system for IDEA, and that is not, I don't think, that's not going to go away. Even if the federal education department is decimated, right? That's not going to go away, but we don't have a parallel state enforcement system for disability discrimination and for Section 504. Okay, so if your student has only a Section 504 plan with disability accommodations and not an IEP, you're dependent upon the federal government, the Office of Civil Rights, right? And if you believe that your child is experiencing discrimination based on disability, you have to go to the federal government, right? And so that's where right now it seems the biggest impact to our community is threatened. It's in disability discrimination and Section 504 enforcement. And so with that backdrop, I'm just going to read Ann Duncan's statement. She said, from my time in the department, I know the Office for Civil Rights serves a critical function when there is trauma or abuse and no redress at the state or local level. I recall one case in particular that stands out. A young girl was raped in band class. The school district ended up suspending the young girl for lewd behavior, and she found no relief from the local level or at the state level. Ultimately, OCR, the entity that backstops all federal civil rights enforcement in education, stepped in as a last resort. Students need to have an independent option like OCR as such a last resort, a last recourse. And this work requires highly skilled, highly trained civil rights lawyers who understand the education system. And this is not a portfolio where you can fire all the highly trained force, transfer it to another agency, and expect it to function in any meaningful way. And those I thought were, some pretty powerful words. And there are more statements like that in other declarations, but I see your hand up, so I'll stop.
I'm trying to let you know, this is Yana. It's hard to gauge the appropriate interruption point. Kathy, we do have a couple of questions that I want to make sure that we talk about. So Susan asked, what practical things can we do? Should we be contacting our kids' caseworkers or case managers about what they are doing in case this happens? Like, if there are, I don't know, if Susan, do you want to talk about what you meant with what happens? Because I think I wasn't able to get all of this. Multitasking is not my strongest suit. So, but I just wanted to interject one thing, that when you talked about we are relying on our state law, I attended a town hall of Jerry Paulette, Representative Paulette, on Saturday, and he actually, unprompted, said, we do need to talk about with the Seattle Special Education PTSA and other advocates about what the state law isn't covering so that we can get ready for it and we can cover it. So of course you came to mind, and I said, well, we appreciate that and we would love that, but we also need attorneys, of course. So I think that would be great to talk, but we're not going to be the most appropriate experts at this, right? So I just want to say that it is on legislators' minds. And then there was another question. Oh, okay. So did you want to answer it, or Susan, did you want to ask the
Yeah,
question in a better way?
just like
Right.
there's different kind of levels of activism, right? And so we can obviously like write our senators and representatives at the federal level. We can do some similar actions at the state level. But then there's also like this ground level support that I think is also important, like at the school level and at the caseworker level, and just like making sure that that we're raising awareness and being loud about it so that we're not ignored, right? Because that's what happens oftentimes, right? That it's not, they might not be planning, or maybe they do have a plan, but they're just kind of waiting to see what happens, and then will be very reactionary. But we know that special education kids will suffer the most from their not planning for kind of a worst case scenario. And to be honest, look, just watching what's going on, something will happen. And so there should be some planning. And so us as parents, like what questions should we be asking in preparation of that?
Thank you, Susan. This is Yana. I want to say that we had Devin Gurley, Executive Director of Special Education. We had invited her, as we invite her to every meeting, but I guess she's still recovering kind of after being sick, so she couldn't come. And there's questions we submitted before the last general membership meeting still didn't get answered. So, and the last time we spoke with her in February, I believe it was, a lot of things were still unclear. So I think if the case managers are not clear, that's really up to their supervisors, right? And I mean, I don't know who is clear, but Kathy, go take it away.
Yeah, if you're talking about IEP case managers, I don't think they'll perceive that there is any impact yet on IEP implementation or, IDEA enforcement for those reasons I mentioned. President Trump said when he signed that executive order Thursday, he's fully preserving special education funding. And it may end up getting transferred to a different department, but he's not eliminating, he says he's not trying to eliminate IDEA. And so what has been eliminated is some of the guidance functions, right? So that training I mentioned, and this Office of Special Education Programs serves as a resource for states, interpreting the IDEA and, issuing guidance on things like, when is classroom removal a denial of a free and appropriate public education, and just a whole range of topics. So it's, but I just want to explain sort of a critical thing about the IDEA. It is fundamentally, it is it's a funding program, right? So states have to comply with the IDEA in order to get federal funding. And if they don't comply with the IDEA, at least theoretically, they could lose that federal funding. But if the federal funding went away, which nobody is proposing yet, but if that federal funding went away, then there would be no obligation anymore for the states to comply with IDEA, right? Because it's a condition of federal funding, which they're not going to get anyway. But that's not happening. So just to be clear, nobody's proposing to get rid of federal funding for IDEA, and the impacts are not going to trickle down yet, I don't think, to the IEP level. The bigger threat right now is, again, to Section 504 enforcement. That's all federal. And disability discrimination enforcement. And so I want to jump to the third question because it sounded like there was interest in that. What can we do about all this? And so I will tell you just briefly how I kind of got involved in this 20-state lawsuit. I am a member of Attorney General Nick Brown's transition team. He has a group of people who he has asked to help guide his the beginning of his term as Attorney General. And I'm also very active in nonprofit advocacy activities in the education arena. And so a bunch of us in the special education attorney community were talking about how we really need to go ask Nick Brown to take over enforcement of Section 504 in Washington, or help arrange for, support the state taking that over, because the federal government can't be relied upon to do it anymore. And so as a member of Nick's transition team, I reached out and I said, hey, can we talk to the Attorney General's office about this? And lo and behold, like a day later, I was asked to, I was told about this lawsuit and asked to have an urgent, meeting with the attorneys for Washington State who are handling it. And I spent that weekend, talking to a bunch of people about trying to get declarations for the case. And so there is a standing request, which was communicated to Yana, for any parents who have pending complaints with OCR to consider offering a declaration about the lack of action, right? And so I don't know how many of you, I know some of you have pending OCR complaints that have been languishing for a long time, even before the staff cuts. But around the country, parents have been getting very discouraging non-responses to their inquiries as to what's happening with their cases, out of office replies, or, just indications that everything has halted. And so if you have a pending OCR complaint, or for that matter, anything that's pending with the Department of Education, and it's stopped, and you can provide evidence of that, that would be of interest. That would be a possible declaration that could go into the lawsuit. And I would be happy to connect you with the state's attorneys. And even though the motion, as I mentioned, was filed yesterday, the motion for preliminary injunction, there was an initial push to get declarations in for that, but they're going to still need declarations later in the case. So that's one thing you can do. On the policy front, yes, Representative Paulette is a great advocate for students with disabilities. And what many of the nonprofit folks have been trying to brainstorm is, how can we just get the state to take over enforcement of discrimination laws? Because even if the lawsuit succeeds, even if Congress, declines to eliminate the Department of Education, we're still going to have, at least for 4 years, an administration that's kind of hostile to the operations of the Education Department. And it illustrates the importance of having our state government involved in this, because right now it really doesn't have a meaningful role in Section 504 enforcement. So that is something you could advocate for. Should we ask the state of Washington to step in here and fill the gap? And honestly, OCR has never been great in Seattle. I mean, I think some of you can attest to that. It's always been very slow. Yeah, so and now it's going to be slow to the point of absolutely worthless. So, and there are some details in the declarations. The caseloads are going, average caseloads for OCR investigators are going from 50 to 120. And so if you thought it was slow before, it's by the time you get a decision from OCR, your child will have graduated. So those are the things that come to my mind as far as what you can do about this situation. There are probably lots of other things, and you may have your own ideas about what can be done. But those are my ideas at the moment.
This is Yana. Thank you, Kathy. There's a lot of questions. I will encourage everybody to just raise their hand, because I'm now with everybody putting in their opinions and feelings, which are totally justified. It's pretty hard for me to keep scrolling back up to the questions. So I will try to ask a couple. And I just want to say, I have very little, I had very little trust in the OCR complaint process before Trump became the president, because I've gone through it a few times, and kind of got very much upset about the level of neglect and inaccurate information, etc., even filing an appeal and things like that by myself. But and I currently have a complaint with the FERPA department, and they stopped. We're not hearing anything, and that's it's hard to tell. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do we tell that these investigations stopped because that's how they operated before, versus Trump's doing, right? So how do we know? And if you know, let us know. And I'm gonna then read.
I have a client whose FERPA complaint um, uh, it took, I think, 4 years to be resolved. So no, you're absolutely right. The FERPA enforcement office was was always, and at least in my experience, has always been slow to the point of being useless. And then so in that sense, you're right. It's you're not going to see as significant difference on that front.
Right. Thank you. So I will call on Michelle after I read this one question and if I miss your question, please feel free to either message me directly or raise your hand, even better. So that was, sorry about that. There was one question I just saw. So, okay, the mechanism to ensure compliance for funding has been eliminated. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. So, okay, this under the IDEA, the federal law, states are responsible for monitoring compliance by school districts. So, in that sense, no, it hasn't been eliminated. To the contrary, I mean, Trump is saying, let's move more control to the states. The states were already supposed to be monitoring compliance by school districts. And OSPI does that in a couple of ways. You have the community complaint system, which I mentioned. They also have these periodic compliance reviews of districts where they go in and proactively look at certain metrics. So that's still going to happen because there's an obligation under IDEA. As long as there's still federal funding for IDEA, which nobody's proposing to stop, then states are still going to monitor compliance. But it's the federal government that monitors the states. So
I was going to
and
do
that's,
that now.
so the federal government monitors the states, and the states monitor the school districts, and when you have half the staff cut from the federal government, yes, there's a risk that ultimately non-compliance will escape attention or escape consequences.
Yeah. Now I think there's no consequences. How is OSPI going to do their job, and therefore how our district's going to be held accountable, right? It's just like a snowball effect, it seems like. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, Michelle, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for being here. I wish I could throw millions of dollars at you because I would. Um, I just have enormous respect for you, and you're at the top of my list when I rob a bank or win the lottery. Um, I have so many questions, but is it possible for Washington State to come up with our own education resolutions or education amendments? Basically, what I'm asking, is it possible that we rewrite our own IDEA or add on to the IDEA and bring it to the 21st century of all the things that it's missing, especially on an ethical basis? Because 50% of my last due process, I couldn't even file due process for it because it wasn't written in the IDEA law. It wasn't a violation of the IDEA law. And I am absolutely out of my mind livid of all the school districts. We won't mention how many Issaquah. They are repeat offenders of the special education law, and so much so that they're just repeating the same violations with the same students every single year as if it's Groundhog Day. and I don't understand why there can't be a once and for all final, like you will no longer get away with this. I almost wish that we could have a Doge for special education for 295 local controlled government school districts who get away with murder like that. I think you understand my
Well,
question.
I well, I think so. I think you were asking about whether Washington basically can have its own version of the IDEA that's better, and it can. In fact, you may have read just recently, Ralph Monroe died. He was the Secretary of State of Washington for a long time, and one of his big accomplishments was he helped pass the state law that was a precursor to the IDEA. So Washington actually had an IDEA before the other states did,
Right.
and it's and um in in general, a state can be more protective of student and parent rights than the IDEA. It cannot be less protective. So, and a good example of the state um, being more protective was this burden shifting law that passed just last year. I mean, or took effect just last year. And, that was Washington didn't have to do that. But legislators listened and they were persuaded that it would make the special education system more fair. And they passed the law placing the burden on school districts in due process cases. That's not in the IDEA. The IDEA is actually silent on which party has the burden. And the courts have said, well, the default is the burden is on whoever files the complaint unless a state says otherwise. So Washington is now one of the states that said, yeah, put the burden on the districts. You can absolutely lobby for laws, state level laws that are more protective than the IDEA. And somebody pointed out, I saw in the chat, that there are state regulations on the IDA. That's absolutely true. It's WAC chapter 392-172A, and those are parallel. The federal IDEA regulations and there are state IDEA regulations, and they're largely the same, but there are a few variations here and there. And I've been involved in rulemaking petitions to make those state regulations more protective. And once in a while, OSPI will agree to do something like that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Did that answer your question, Michelle?
Yes, and I just want to volunteer as tribute to be the parent doge that audits school districts for repeat offenders. If we create that.
Yep. Well, I think we all have those ideas late at night when we're doing our research. So thank you. Yeah. So we will take two more questions because I believe that Kathy's on the East Coast and we need to respect her evening time. And also we have some PTA business to attend to. But if you would like, please unmute because at this point, the chat is full of a lot of really good questions and really big emotions too, understandably. So feel free to unmute while I scroll through the chat. But
And can I just ask,
this
the
is
last time
Janelle. Yeah.
oh yes, sorry. I was just wondering if there had been an amicus brief for the Texas versus PTSA case through our state AG office.
Okay, that's the one. I think I know what that case is. That's the one where they're on the other side. And I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer if Washington has done an amicus brief in that. I can find out though.
Or like
I
how worried
haven't,
we
I,
should be
I
about it?
haven't, I haven't followed that case as much because, and maybe I'm being too optimistic. It just seems so unlikely to succeed, but maybe I'm being too trusting of our courts. But I'll find out. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to it.
So Kathy, would it be okay for us to share your email address? Or would you
Yeah.
rather, yeah? Okay, so I'm gonna put Kathy's email in the chat. And I think if you have one more question, please raise your hand. And let us know. Okay, so I have an anonymous question. How, from somebody who just pinged me, how the attacks on DEI might affect our ability to advocate? Excellent question. Thank you. And now we need all the answers, Kathy.
Yeah, let me think about that. Well, okay, well here's what comes to mind on that. I mentioned earlier that there, to the extent there is still a Department of Education, with only half the staff it had a few months ago, that doesn't mean they're still doing the work they used to do. And the Trump administration has shifted priorities. So instead of being concerned with civil rights and protecting the right to be free of discrimination based on disability, ethnicity, and so forth, the Trump administration has shifted its priorities, its enforcement priorities, to punishing schools for protecting transgender students and staff. So I don't know if that's directly responsive to your question, but I mean, it's a different attitude. It's a dramatically different attitude that is unfriendly. I mean, the Trump administration is hostile to civil rights in general. I hope that's not an overstatement, but I don't know. I'm not really sure how to answer your question as far as how would it affect advocacy, other than I think that certain complaints are going to be shuffled aside in order to focus on the types of complaints that the Trump administration is enthused about. So I hope that makes sense. And it is 11:15 p.m. here where I am, so I'm getting a little
Well,
tired here.
yeah, this is Yana. So Kathy, thank you for staying even longer than you agreed to. We appreciate it very much. I think we're just going to have to stay in touch with you and either have you come visit or give us some information to share out. And we're happy to do that any time of the day, that's how we operate over here. So, you have a good night and thank you again for joining us. And I'm sorry if we didn't get to people's questions. We could probably sit here all night long and still not get all the answers we have. So thank you, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks for
Kathy.
having me here. Thanks for your interest in this.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. So I do want to spend we have business, a PTA business, and this is a lot to process. So please don't leave. I do want to kind of say that we're going to have a sip and chat coming up. I believe it's April 23rd. Thank you so much. Yeah, April 23rd. So hopefully by then we will know more. I did hear that there is an article coming out about the lawsuits filed. So of course we'll be sharing that out through our social media and newsletter, etc. Please do join us. We moved the sip and chat to a little bit of a later time because we found out that more parents can actually attend after kiddos are in bed or close. And so we hope to see you there. And then there's another one on May 21st, and I believe that one we need to still confirm, but that one we're hoping would be dyslexia. If not that week, then there would be another one the following week in May. All right, so I think the next next topic, we have only 13 minutes left. So I think that this is outdated, actually. What the next topic is treasurer report. And I'm skipping the minutes, but we do need to get minutes approved right after the treasurer report. So Catherine is our treasurer, and hopefully I get to spotlight you now. Oh, I'll make you a co-host so that you can share your screen. All right, thank you.
Oops, wrong screen, I think. Can you see the treasurer report?
This is Yana. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hi, my name is Catherine Muth. I am the treasurer for the Seattle Special Education PTSA. And for the month of February, it was kind of quiet. We had $55 in membership dues and some related PayPal expenses. For the year, we're looking pretty good against our budget. Membership dues are coming in at about $1,100 versus a budget of $1,500. And then related expenses are under budget since we haven't hit our budget numbers for revenue related to membership dues. So those membership totals are looking like about $600 net revenue compared to a budget of $230. We were able to obtain the VECU People Helping People grant, which boosted our grants revenue. So that is in line with that line item. And then we have had some meeting expenses and some other operational expenses for the PTA year to date. Total net budget for the year or net income for the year is sitting right under $14,000 versus a budget of about $3,500. And cash balances at the end of the month are about $31,000. That's just kind of my quick overview given time constraints for the evening, but if there are any questions, please let me know.
Okay, so we're going to need to, I don't see whether we paid the interpreters yet, but
We have paid interpreters $540
fantastic.
for the year. I
Thank
have
you.
another bill to pay, but that'll show up next month.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. Anybody has questions? We don't need to approve anything tonight. This is just the regular report to membership. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. So we're going to move on to, we only have 9 minutes, but we're going to get through the approval of the general membership meeting minutes from January. We're going to start with January because we didn't have time last time, so we need to approve those. I'm going to pull them up, and if you were in the meeting, please, okay. please, if you were in the meeting, please take a look. And then when people are ready to vote, you can make a motion and second. I'm gonna put, yep. Let me know if I need to scroll. This is from January 21st. And we reviewed the amendments of our standing rules that had to be amended based on Washington State PTA bylaws changes. And also we made some of our own changes that got approved. Then we had a presentation about multi-tier system of supports by RJ Morton, Director of MTSS from OSPI. That we had legislative priorities that we amended and approved. Here's what, and then the motion passed, and I think that is all we did. So if I can have a motion.
This is Mel. I move for the meeting minutes of January to be approved.
Okay, can I have a second?
This is Kate. I second the motion.
All right, so all in favor, or is there a debate? Sorry. Or any corrections or anything? No. So all in favor, if you could raise your hand, whether it is virtual or your physical hand, please let us know that you agree we can approve them. Okay. We only have 6. So we need 10 people to vote. Oh, 7. All right. Okay, awesome. We have 11 votes. The motion passes. Thank you. The January 1st general membership meeting meeting notes minutes are approved. Okay, Mel, do you have the notes from February?
I do. Yeah, I am right now. Let me see. I'm also putting into the chat the YouTube video that we posted for that meeting. These are going to look different than the last ones. I need you to stop sharing. Or is that me sharing?
Oh, no, it isn't.
Okay. These are handwritten notes, so they're a little bit. Here we go.
Awesome.
Do not have time to type them up. I'll go through them real quick. We had a presentation by Brian Day, Director of the STEM and Career Training Education with Seattle Public Schools, and he did a presentation that was really informative. Went through the living wage tool and the 9 career pathways. Had some questions. He really took a lot of input about how to reach families to make sure that they know about all the services that are available. Oh, I don't know why that stopped. Hold on.
Nope, we can see it. We can see
I
it.
can't, but I can't. There's another page.
I'll let you look for it. I will just add that I emailed Brian Day and Caleb Perkins, who are, the CTE and career, CDE and career and college readiness administrators in the district. And I emailed them some information that I kind of received of how they do things around their school counseling services in their district, and forwarded. And I found out, I was thanked, and I found out that they actually are rolling with discussion about the proposed, can we please have this? And then I found out that the Seattle Public Schools hired Brittany Thompson as a new school-based counseling, school counseling program manager. And I've worked with Brittany when she was senior ombuds at the Office of Educational Ombuds. And this is an awesome advocate for students and centers, families, and students in every decision that's being made. She formerly worked in SPS. and then at OSBI in the counseling department. So I think things are looking up in the counseling department, or even in SBS now. So just wanted to share. Go ahead, Mel.
Okay, so we didn't have enough people to approve the January minutes, so that business was skipped, and we didn't have the ability to do the nominating committee. We did that this meeting, so that's not part of these notes. But these are what we have along with the link that I shared in the chat if you wanted to watch the meeting.
Thank you. So anybody has any?
Dustin has his hand up.
Okay, Dustin, go ahead and ask questions unless we can have a motion first.
Sorry, that was just a delayed
okay.
gesture.
Yeah. So if I could have a motion in a second, that would be fabulous.
I make a motion, this is Mel, to approve the February meeting minutes.
Okay.
This is Dustin, I'll second.
Thank you. And if we could stop sharing so we can get the...
Yeah, hold on.
Right. Any discussion, any notes on anything? Nope. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, good. Okay, all opposed, which I forgot to do with the first notes. Oops. Okay, I'm gonna wait for you guys to take those down. If you are opposed, speak now or never.
Forever hold your peace.
Okay. All right, seeing none, anybody abstained? All right, seeing none. So the minutes are approved. Thank you so much. And we have 2 minutes of the meeting remaining. Could I ask ASL interpreters to stay 5 minutes extra so we can get through the committee reports? Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay, so let's start with legislative advocacy, and then we're gonna see where we get.
This is Mel again. I have a presentation. It's pretty large. It's not going to work tonight, but we do have the legislative advocacy meeting tomorrow at noon that that everybody can go to learn more. And I will also post. I can post the slides on our website or something like that if anybody's interested in that. But it's pretty lengthy. I unfortunately had to work overtime today. I wasn't able to watch the committee reports. I mean, the House Appropriations or the Senate Ways and Means, and they were still in session when I started attending this meeting. So I couldn't watch the recording to get the quick update on what they did with the funding bills that were being heard today. But I'll have that update in tomorrow's meeting.
Fabulous. I'm going to find the login. Otherwise, it's on our calendar on our website. So, there's a meeting link and everything there. It's at noon, 12 o'clock, 12 to 1, lunch hour. All right. So I guess the budget is very big topic. Also, there is Seattle Council PTSA has 2 to 3 p.m. on Saturdays. They have meetings about advocacy. Anybody is welcome to join. Those are really a lot about legislative advocacy at the state level. Last week, we kind of discussed all the crazy things going on all over the place, not just at state level, but at the federal level as well. But that's Seattle Council PTSA has that on their website, on their calendar. And I know that anyone can join, even if you're not a PTA member of any kind. All right. So I think, is there anything else, Mel? When does the session, the legislative session end?
My brain is mush right now. I would
April.
have to look in my notes and they're pretty scurvy. So
It's okay. I think it's after mid-April, but I'll look.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
We're right now, bills are switching houses, so they're going to the opposite house right now, and they'll be in committee meetings again. So we'll start having testimonies available, public testimonies coming up. And
mhm.
I'll have a list of the committees that you can testify in tomorrow.
Yeah, so then, when the bill goes through the Senate, then when it leaves the Senate, it goes into the House and it goes through the House, right? So whatever we have left from it, then they kind of negotiate what the changes were made in each house, and we see some kind of similar bill pass. So we're just gonna hope that things are looking up. I know that a couple of things were kind of gutted, couple bills.
The push was to have the vehicle of the funding for special education. The bill that's moving that forward is from Senator Peterson. And the push is to reinstate all the funds that were in Representative Pollitt's bill to try and get those back up to those levels. So that's what our written testimony asks for from our organization.
Thank you so much, Mel. This is Yana. Thank you so
Yep.
much for just keeping up with all of that. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
I do want to have one reminder before we go to Face Committee isn't going to have Sherlyn isn't here today, but you saw when we have the sip and chat, there is one reminder that Seattle School Board Community Engagement Meeting is tomorrow at 5:30 to 6:30 at Rainier Beach High School. So I think it's 5:30 to 6:30, but I made these slides very late at night, so forgive me if I'm not correct. I will put a link to that meeting in the chat. More information.
And this meeting will be updated to our YouTube as well, if anybody wants to rewatch it.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. And then, Kate, do you have a report, anything to report?
This is Kate. Nothing to report.
Thank you so much. So, this adjourns our meeting. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And we will see you in our general membership meeting in April. If not before that, thank you.
Thanks, interpreters. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you for coming and interpreting for us. We appreciate your hard work. Have a good night, everyone.